Awesome. I heard the announcement, the recording's in progress. Just so you know, it's been just a magnificent, flawless presentation to this point. That's not true. But it's been okay. Yeah, Chad's giving me the thumb up there. Anyway, what we talked about is creating an Azure account, creating configuring Visual Studio to work with that, creating a team project in the middle of that, and kind of compare and contrast Team Foundation server projects to get as we go along here. I'm in a TFS project, and when I right click the solution, you can see I can click add solution to source control. When I do that, I have to go tell it where I want it, and it'll create the basically the solution folder out there in TFS. This is the reverse of Git. So you clone an empty directory or an empty repo locally, and then you can move files into that, and then Git starts communicating based on the Git magic happening under the hood there. Once I click OK, you see these little plus signs here. They show up in TFS, and they'll tell me you've assigned this, but you haven't checked anything in yet. The way you fix that is you just right click, and here I'm clicking the project and click and check in. I encourage you to add a comment. I always tell you future you will thank you for adding check-in comments, and that way those are saved out there with the versions, and you can go scroll through and learn stuff about it. Often enterprises will have formats that they want you to put the comments in. It'll help manage the different versions and stuff. I started doing this a long time ago when I started using source control. I'll put in a date and my name and then some note, even if it's just me. And my Azure DevOps is just me. Once I click check in, I get the little blue locks or Azure locks. And, and then it's out there and it's kind of working like I want it to. So let's go to my WS here. And this is Azure DevOps, and I'll maximize this. Let's zoom in here. These are the solutions that are part of this repo. The one we're going to be working with is test SSIS solution, and you can see that initial check-in. And if I go to the test SSIS solution here, and then click on history, you'll be able to see these different things that I've been doing. I've been working on this all day just for y'all, because when I started working, it wasn't working. And I was like, why? Why is it not working? So I started today at 10:37 when I started looking at it, and I battled it all day. I figured out why. I said this before the recording started. The last time I did this, you can actually see it from the history, was in January. I guess it's still possible. It just requires more configuration. I have more than one subscription, and I had, sorry about that. Let me stop that. That actually just loaded the greenhouse data. I showed that before the recording as well. You go to shut that app down. The app actually called an SSIS package to pump data up to the cloud for the greenhouse thing. It used to be you could like run Azure DevOps in one subscription, and I'm running it in my enterprise data and analytics subscription, but I could manipulate stuff over in another subscription. And I built it like that, and it worked up until today. It probably stopped sometime between January and today, but it took me a really, really long time to figure out what was going on. And while I was searching for the answer by putting in the errors I was getting and, and searching, I wasn't really getting anything that said, here's the answer. So I blog a lot. It's because I like to write. And that's why I write books and stuff too. I do it because I like to write. And one pro tip I'll share with you is take a screenshot of the error so that you've got that there. But the search engines can't really read that They probably could do it, but they're not going to read it on my little blog and do OCR. But so I put the text of the message in there as well, that they can read. And then you'll get a lot of hits. And I've got posts from, I don't know, 5-8 years ago that people go to and leave comments. And there's like 100 comments on there, which is a lot for me. Okay. I'm not Brent Ozar. But there's like 100 comments on it saying, "That's a lifesaver. I didn't know, I found this post and it was right on what I needed." So that's awesome when that happens. But this is just kind of a view of the history of that. If I go back to the actual stuff, the SSIS packages that are in here, you can see that there's a text file that has some information about Azure DevOps in there for me. What I point this out, so if you're doing a data integration project, SSIS project, maybe you're loading a data warehouse and you will get these mapping documents that'll say, here's the source and stuff about the source. And here's like some transformation stuff I want you to do, kind of how to translate it. And then over here, I want you to land it in the destination, and you'll see like a row for each field. Do that. It's not uncommon. Do yourself a favor, go into Visual Studio and right click on the project and click Add Existing Item. Navigate to that Excel file or Word doc or whatever it is and add that to the project. And you go, well, why would you do that? Well, when you source control it, that goes in as well. And so if somebody changes, I know, wait, look, it's hypothetical. Nothing ever changes in a data warehouse project. But let's just play along, pretend that maybe something changed. And I know, crazy. Nobody tells you. So you get to the monthly Scrum show off or whatever, and you start demoing what you built, and they go, "Oh, didn't you get the updated mapping doc?" It's like, what updated mapping doc? And it could be that you should have gotten it. You should have set up a notification or something, and you didn't do that. It could be all your fault. But sometimes it's not, and people will try to make it like it's your fault. And you can say, this is what I've been working off of. You can take them right to this repo, show them this, and say, here it is. Here's what I've been doing. So, less egg on you, more egg on them. But this is what it looks like, just files. When you go to the project itself, actually, I should have started at the top. You have these little, I call these tiles. I don't know what the right word is for it, but you can see I've got quite a few in here. The last one, the one beside this, is the Greenhouse IoT project. That's what GHIOT is. And then here's files, and there's other stuff in here we're not really going to dive into. But as we start drilling through here, you can see the files that make all of this up. So I can stop here if there's any questions about any of this. This is just straight up source control. No questions?
Yep, the chat looks clean, so it sounds like you're good.
I'm doing an excellent job there. I'm kidding. So the next step is we're going to talk about configuring agents. I got to tell you, I started back in the mid 70s. Okay, I was a young person, like 11, when I started working with computers. Long story, but the short version is when we get to today, I'm like living beyond Star Trek. And I mean the original series, or what we Trekkies call TOS. I am well beyond all that. And it's amazing to me to be living at a time like this and doing this kind of work. I still get all giggly inside when I get something to run. And when these agents are just, I can't explain it. I'll get all giggly, and it won't be any good for either of us. But what's going on is that there's a little program called an agent that I'm downloading from Azure DevOps, and it's going to run on my virtual machine. I'm on a virtual machine. Well, I'm on the big machine here, the host, but we're going to do the demos on the VM. It's going to run on there. And when when we get stuff kind of working up there, it's going to do the work down here. And then they're going to communicate, and you'll be able to see it. I'm just floored by that. I love that whole idea of distributed computing. We're going to talk about configuring them. There's a good blog post out there. And by the way, if anybody wants these slides, I'll send them to you. You can have them and, correct me, correct anything that needs to correct on here. There's probably a lot, but this doc kind of walks you through it, but it's fascinating when we get through this. I'm not going to demo how to create a personal access token, but one of the things that I like to point out on this slide is there was, for the longest time, they were saying, go to the organization settings and click on personal access tokens. It's not there. In fact, it's up here. You got this little person and a gear. You click that, that's where personal access tokens are. They probably corrected that because I think the screenshot's at least a couple years old. When it comes up, you click on new token, and then you can, leave it. The default is 30 days, but I usually drop this down and set it for like a year. And they expire all the time. It's fine. Just go make a new one. It's not that big of a deal. You want the agent pools, read and manage, and scrolling down here, there is a build, I think, build and manage. Maybe you also want, read and manage for that builds one. Those are the two that you need. It's all in that document, and you can find that or something better. Here's the organization settings, and this is where I go to set up the agent itself. The agents swim in pools, and the default pool is the one you want to use if you're going to do hosting on like your VM or on your side of the house. This is the one you want to pick. Want to make a new agent there, and in the default pool, may have a screen that looks like this. I haven't seen that screen in such a long time. I have no idea what it looks like now, but this is impressive. It takes you here because I built a new agent on this VM today, and it doesn't quite work. I'll just say that, but you can figure out from the error messages in PowerShell what's going on. It actually will work if you read it and realize that little PS is telling you you're in a command prompt and not in the ISE. But I didn't catch that until I tried to beat on this and get it to make me a directory on my C drive named agent. Yeah, no. So anyway, I kind of went through this, and I ended up just running the command straight out of the privileged administrator command prompt. But you download it, and it actually puts the name of the file in there. I think this number is up to 195 now or something. And it gives you download the file. It shows up in downloads. You don't move it. Please don't move it. And then go run this script. You copy the script and paste it into into a console, Windows console, admin. Then you can run this if you'd like. I was in Windows. I just did, I came out of PowerShell and I just typed config. That works. And then when it's ready to run, I just type the run down there that you can see. This is what it asked me to start with. And there's the server URL to the ENTDNA organization out there. And when you go through the config, it asks you these questions. I was actually configuring this for my Lenovo P51, which I named Mustang, if you remember your World War II aircraft designations. And I went through and set it up. It's remarkably similar. I think there may have been one other thing it asked you here, but I'm not sure. But it's remarkably similar today for that. You just go through. I accepted the defaults. When it asked you here for the personal access token. So today, when I went there, I had to create a new one. It actually told me in there, and I can't remember if it told me this before or not, but it says copy this. It's even got one of those little copy links beside the text. It says, because you're never going to be able to see this again, something like that. You can't like open it and do it. That's why if that happens to you, don't panic. Just go make a new personal access token and copy it, paste it in a notepad for 10 minutes while you finish and paste it into here. And then you're done with it, close the notepad and don't save it it's not going to, there's nothing you can do with it as far as I can tell once you've done the configure here. And then it's time to run, and it kind of walks through. It does this still, scans for tool capabilities, connects to the server, and then starts listening for jobs. So I think I've already got that running, but I'll stop it and start it again so you can see it. So I've got an administrator console going here, and this will be kind of cool because you can see how to stop it. I hold down Control and press C. It tells me exiting. Now, sometimes I have to go Control C, 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 C to get it to do this, but most of the time I'm there. I'm going to do CLS. I'm going to open config. I'm going to start it, and then I hope it doesn't break it because I like that little text thing there. I forget what they call that. It's not pixel art. That's the wrong thing. But an error is reported. Cannot configure the agent because it's already configured. Okay, good. It saved me from myself there. But isn't that cool looking? I think so too. So now I'm just going to run it. And when I do, you'll see it. It's going to start itself up and kind of get a list of things it can do. And it's communicating with Azure DevOps up there. That's what it's doing now and connecting with the server. And now it's connected and it's ready to listen for jobs. That was really exciting for the demo. I know, right? But let's continue on. I'd be happy to take any questions before we move into the pipelines part.
Just general amazement at the fact that there are agents that you can use for Azure.
Oh, yeah. And they're all over the place. And in addition to that, you can write similar functionality yourself. You know, you can just do it C# or VB or whatever your language is. You can just do that. The APIs behind all of these services out there in Azure are just extremely rich, and they just keep growing. So it's just a lot of really neat stuff that you can do. I agree with you though. Excuse me. Kind of amazing. All right, let's talk about pipelines. And I need to stop here and tell you this is a little bit contrived, what I'm going to share with you here. So when I built this presentation, I realized a couple of things. Number one, there's a lot in here. And number two, if you're coming to this presentation, there's a possibility, and I want to say it's probably likely that you haven't done this before. And if you've never built a pipeline before, the last thing I want to do is intimidate you. So just there's build pipelines, there's release pipelines. I want to say there's test pipelines and stuff like that too. But you're really, if you know how to use the activities that are there, the tasks inside of any of these pipelines, and they're mostly the same, you can do what you need. You're not, in my humble opinion, you're not limited to that. Now, if you're doing this in the enterprise, you definitely want to be taking advantage of things like artifacts and deployment pipelines and that sort of stuff. You do want to do that. But what I'm trying to do is get you from maybe where you are, and you could be almost here. Maybe you're just getting started. Maybe you're not doing source control at all. I have to share with you that there are two types of developers: those who use source control and those who will, because you'll lose code and it'll break your heart. Ask me how I know. So go use source control. This, by the way, Azure DevOps is free for you, and I think 4 or 5 of your friends. I think it's a limit of 5 people. It's free. And I want to just make sure you understood what I meant by that. It's free. You don't have to update the servers, patch them, and all of that stuff, manage the OS, nothing. You just go to dev.azure.com and you create an account there, and it's free. So when you're piddling around at home, playing with projects and stuff like that, do this, get this set up. Yeah, it's a hassle to set it up, but it's not a big hassle. It won't take you, all day or something. It's probably just a couple hours tops. Get this set up. You have questions, you run into stuff, email me. My email address is here in there, and and I'll add it to the chat before we're done. Just do this, and that way, if something bad happens, if you lose a drive, you don't lose all your code. And just get this up there. I don't know that there's a limit on how many projects you can store. I haven't hit it, and I've got a bunch up there. And I've got a few friends that are also connected to that. So when we start talking about configuring pipelines, I'm just going to use build pipelines. And I'm going to use them to do the build and to do the deployment, and then eventually to do some testing and some more deployment, because pipelines are cool. When I delivered this talk for the very first time, it was a couple of years ago at the PASS Summit 2019. They had a brand new build and deploy SSIS tasks out there. And I was sharing those as well. One of the members of the team from Shanghai came over and beat me to it by a couple of days, darn him, but that's okay. And we're still friends for the most part. But I'll share those with you as well. So you go to pipelines, and when you get on there, you click new and then a new build pipeline that you can import. And there's a lot of functionality in here we're just not going to cover. It asks a question like, where's your code right now? It actually kind of asks this question twice, because here it tells you, you know, are you in TFVC, Team Foundation Version Control? I am. And then I click continue. And then it asks me to select a template. And I go with the empty job. I don't use that. Remember, if you can actually do all of this up in the cloud, you can have it spin up, essentially spin up a VM for you up there and deploy to that and run everything inside of that VM. When I was building this presentation, that was taking me like 10 or 12 minutes. And I was like, no, plus it was costing me money. No and no. So, but the default, I had my agent running locally. As soon as I saw how fast that was, I was like, yeah, it starts in like 3 seconds. So I moved it all down to here, and I just stuck with this forever. You can configure variables in here. This is one I'm doing right here, the PWD password bar. That is, I use it in a number of places in there. And then I can reference it in the tasks that are in the pipeline proper. There's some other stuff. I can't remember. I think I added system debug, but I think it's in there now for free. It just shows up. But back in the old days, when we had to carve our chips out of wood, you had to add that yourself. You click a plus, and you give it you create a new agent, and you give it a name there. And because I've configured this pipeline to use the default pool, I'm just telling this agent to inherit from the pipeline. Now, remember, using default, it's going to allow me to run this with my local agent. In this case, I ran with the SSIS build and SSIS deploy. These even look differently, but you just search. You click the plus to add a task, and then you just type in, SSIS if you're doing what I'm doing here. There's a bunch of tasks out there, and I'm pretty sure there's some third-party tasks you can buy and there's a bunch that the community has built and added out here. They're going to be varying quality. It's part of it. And you may or may not have access to the source code to fix it. In the build here, you kind of have to learn about these project paths and some of the language here, like output paths, especially $ begin paren, build dot artifact staging directory. So that's kind of a constant that you set up when you were configuring the agent. And on a local agent, it's the defaults to _work. That's the output path that it's going to run. And what's interesting about this build is it's going to go find your solution checked in to Azure DevOps. So it's going to use the source controlled version of it. It's going to pull that out, run it through this build engine, kind of like MS Build does. And then it's going to write this output out, ready to be consumed by the next step, which is usually when we're deploying, all of this happens, right? Especially when we're deploying to the catalog, and we're going to deploy to an SSIS catalog in the cloud. It's going to get it ready for that second step. Here, it separates build and deploy. When you add deploy, you configure it like this. And one of the reasons I'm taking a little time on these slides is I am not going to do this. I'm just showing you the pictures of what it looks like, and it hasn't changed. It looks just like this. And you can see here, I'm going after the ISPAC file that for project deployment model or projects, SSIS projects that are built for the SSIS catalog. That's a collection of them. And in fact, if you've got something like 7-zip installed on your machine, you can right click that ISPAC file and tell it open archive. It's a zip file. All of those pack files, you know, I forget the one for the database, DAC pack, that's a zip file. They're all zip files. Anything that ends in pack, you can just right click and 7-zip will just open it, or you can just tag .zip onto the end of the full name and then double click it and Windows Explorer will open it for you. It's been that way for a few versions now, but that's the deployment artifact. That's what it's going to be deployed. And inside of there, you'll see your packages and a couple of custom files that MS Build needs, but it's all in there. I'm going to the SSIS catalog. It's named SSIS DB. Mine is out here on this server. That's the one we're going to be hitting today. And I'm not sending it to the Past Summit 2019 folder. I'm sending it to one called, I think it's DevOps Test or something like that. Test DevOps, I forget. We'll look at it. I'm using SQL Server Auth, admin Andy, and there's how I read the value inside of that password variable I showed you earlier. It's encrypted. I got the little lock checked. If it's already out there, overwrite it, which means it's just going to make a new version in the catalog. And then if it hits an error, I want it to stop. And trust me, this worked. I tested this dozens of times today. It stopped every single time, right up until the last minute. So let's look at doing the build part here. Let's go to here. And I've got a pipeline here. I'm going to go over to pipelines, and I'm going to go to this 0 pipeline here, build and deploy. And this is all it does. So where is it deploying to? Well, I'm glad you asked. It's deploying to here. My SVA, you saw that, and it's DevOps test. So it's actually going to deploy the project to here, and it's got a bunch of packages in it. I want to say 5 or 6, and the one we're going to run, I believe, is, I think it's report parameter and succeed. Maybe not. It's either that or write a record and succeed. I'll have to look to be sure, but it's going to deploy a new version of this, and to prove that, I'm going to start up here at the top and refresh. And this is the integration services node in the cloud, in the catalog, and then projects. And when I right click this, I can look at versions. And this takes a while to show up here because I'm running 25 meg DSL and the junior engineers are downstairs playing games. So the last one I ran was 908 UTC. So we're going to see that number change on the deployment. So back here in my 0-build and deploy, I am going to click run pipeline. And it's going to ask me, hey, what do you want to do here? And I'm going to click run. And we're going to see this job is running. I'm going to click that link. And this makes me all giggly here. We're just kind of watching this. And by the way, we're going to see it. There it is, running job, vdemo agent -0- build and deploy. And I'm kind of going to zoom in between the two and slide over here. You'll see it. First thing, when it initialized the job, it added all these steps. So it's executing the build part right now. It's down here. Well, it just finished. Now it's deploying. And you'll see that when it's done, it'll come back and say it either succeeded or failed. Looks like it was successful, and it should tell us that here in the agent. Oh, it's not finished yet. Okay, it was kind of cleaning up after itself. So completed with success. You can't see this, but there's an email coming that'll pop up here in a couple of seconds. That'll tell me it ran the job and it succeeded. That'll be the kind of the headline and all of that. But now it's back to listening for more jobs. So that's the demo of that piece. I've got another kind of a bonus, which what I was after back when I was doing that presentation at the past summit, 14 years ago, was I wanted to be able to do what the cool kids did, right? The C# developers and stuff. And what they would do is they would check in their code and this automated process would kick off and run tests and all of that. And, if they were bold enough, it would deploy it to all the way through to production. That is CICD in a nutshell. So it turns out you can do that. I'm just going to walk through. You have to add some test execution and test evaluation. And I've got a table in here called test.results. It's a test schema. And I'm looking for just one and only one record in there. And I'll explain that a little bit better when we go look at the SSIS package that we're going to be using here. I'm also using something I built called the SSIS Framework. A lot of people have built SSIS frameworks. Heck, the catalog is an SSIS framework. But I built one, and the one that I'm using is free and open source. And if you go to a website that I maintain called DILM Suite, Suite is SUITE.com. DILM stands for Data Integration Lifecycle Management. If you go to that site, you can find the framework, SSIS Framework Community Editions, what it's called. You click on that page and there's a video and a description, and there's a link right at the top that'll take you over to my GitHub. And you can just download the bits and play with it to your heart's content. It's free and open source. There's the licenses. I don't know, like you can take it and make money off of it. If you do, drop me a line. Let me know you made some money off of it, because then I'll write your name down and you'll owe me a beverage when we're back to in person. So that, that's all that part. Well, again, I'll show you that the SSIS package that's going to do the one thing. And this is just a little short bit about how I built the Framework Community Edition CE. If you execute, you get this execute package dialog, and then if you click script to a new query window, you get something that looks like this for that report and succeed package. And what motivated me to do this was I wanted to be able to, I was doing this in the file system. I had written a file system framework, and years ago, I was an independent consultant, and when things slowed down around 2007, 2008, Unisys hired me to build them a framework because they were moving from Informatica to SSIS, and apparently Informatica has all this built in. I don't know, I'm not an Informatica person, but I didn't learn until much, much later how much money Informatica was charging them. And I wish I'd have known that at the interview. I would have asked for more, or just a small percentage. But it turned out I didn't get that. I'll bet somebody did, but it wasn't Andy. And that's okay. Bygones and all that. I wanted to be able to run, when the catalog came out, I wanted to be able to run this package that I've been dragging around with me called archive file. And it archives a file. It's all parameterized with variables to start with, and later with parameters. So I'm talking with my friends on the SSIS team at Microsoft, and I said, hey, how do I do this? And they said, it's got to be in the same project. So you just right click import package and you bring it into your project. And I'm like, okay. So at Unisys at the time, we had about 30 projects that we were running, and they had anywhere from like 2 to, I don't know, 80, maybe 90 packages in them. And sometimes archive file was being called multiple times in the middle of that. And I'm like, all right, so I do that for all of my projects and deploy to the catalog. They're like, yeah. I said, what if I want to add some functionality to it? Or God forbid, I find a bug. They're like, well, you fix the bug or add the functionality, and then you re-import it into all 30. And I was just like, don't even finish that sentence. That's stupid. What I need is to be able to put that package in its own little project in the catalog and just call it from metadata wherever, whenever, and wherever I want. Then if I find a bug or want to add some functionality, I just deploy one out to that one spot, like any normal developer would do. And then I can have it upgraded, and I don't have to deploy a bunch of projects that don't really need to be deployed. And I think the conversation ended after that, and I'm pretty sure we're still friends, not positive. But when I scripted this, and by the way, I found that button by accident. This is what engineers with ADHD do, right? You see a button, it's like, wonder what that does. Click it. And it blew out these 3 stored procs. This pattern that we're seeing here is old as computers. And they're older than me, pretty old. It creates an intent to execute using a create execution stored proc. It configures the intent to execute, and then it executes. It executes the intent to execute. Now, this middle step can be multiple calls of stuff in here for configuration stuff. There's always at least one for the logging level. This create execution is a singleton, start execution, obviously a singleton. But when I saw this, what really caught my eye was package name, folder name, project name. I was like, wait a minute. I know how to write stored procedures. So I did. And I created a procedure called custom.execute catalog package. And this is what you get when you go get that code at dilmsuite.com. And you can see it in here. You can see me creating the intent to execute. And I just made those parameters, package name, project name, folder name, and the login level. So I thought that was clever. I wore out 3 sets of elbows, patting myself on the back. True story. And so now when we get to the pipeline, execution and test, I've got a version of this out there in a version of this free framework out there. And I've got what I call an application configured. And I'm going to run an SSIS package using the framework. Now, it's a long, more than we have time to go into, but it's actually running from Azure Data Factory. So there's a pipeline that calls the parent package and passes it the name of the application. And then the name of that, the parent package takes that application name, runs a query against the tables of metadata inside of this framework, and brings back a row for each package that's in there. There's only one in this particular one. But then there's a for each loop, and inside the for each loop, there's an execute SQL task, and each execute SQL task calls the execute catalog package stored proc we just looked at. So it'll loop through. If you got 1 in there, it'll do 1. You got 100, it'll do 100. It does it serially, but there's ways to trick that out. We don't have time for that. All right, so I added Azure PowerShell in here, and I run the package using the SSIS, the SSIS framework in the middle, and I'm doing that with PowerShell. It was a lot of fun to build this. I learned a bunch, and then I'm running a test suite, and all the test suite is really doing. This is stuff for the running it, and I'm using AZ. If you're not using AZ, do that instead of Azure RM. I'm pretty sure I think Azure RM is still around, but I don't think they've done any work on it for about a year now. I put a sleep in here because I was losing the race. Then for the test part, I'm just running a command and getting me a count of the records in there. And remember, if it doesn't equal 1, if I don't have 1 row in there, then I throw an error. And this is, the record count not equals 1 right there. And then I'm writing out an error if that happens. So beyond that, now I enable triggers on this, and I'm going to show you how to set this up as we go through the next few slides. It turns out for that very first one, you can just click on triggers and check the box, enable continuous integration. Boom, it's done. So what that means is every time I check in, this package is going to run this pipeline. So that's kind of cool. But I got 2 more pipelines that are there. And so it turns out you can go into triggers for this, and you can say on build completion, you can add one of these tasks on build completion. Then, and notice you can just keep clicking add. You can have this thing spider out It can run other pipelines. This is on, you set one of these up for each next pipeline you want. So this is saying this pipeline is a deploy to production. And when that deploy to test succeeds, completes and succeeds, it's that action is going to trigger this pipeline to run. A little bit of a daisy chain here, right? And then finally, I've got another one that does a thing on it executes in what I call production. I wouldn't do this in production. I do dev to test it. I deploy it to dev and then run the test. So let's look at that. Let's look at triggering the build and how that all works. So if I go back to my jobs here, let's go back to the pipelines. I'm done with 0. If I look at 1, this is the one that I want to set to trigger. So I want to go to edit. I'll zoom in a minute. And there's triggers. And I've already got that set. Just enable continuous integration and which one I want to look at. When SSIS samples gets checked in, I want you to start running this one. Okay, that's what that says. Go back up to build pipelines and go look at twos triggers. And I gotta edit first. I wish they had, there may be a way to edit over there. I just don't know what it is. And here's a, let's see, do I have it in here? I better. Oh, it's on triggers. All right. So build and deploy and test. So now it's running when number 1 finishes, it's going to trigger number 2. And you'll never guess what happens at number 3. You'll never guess. In this case, it failed. Back over here to triggers. You guessed that when that number 2 finishes, that triggers number 3. And this last time it failed because one of the things I changed when I moved it was I changed the name of the resource group. And I had to go edit it in a couple of places here, but this is just going to execute it in the framework. That's the name of the parent pipeline. I can show you this. There's a task inside of Azure Data Factory, an activity, not a task, but similar to a task that executes SSIS. And there's a number of ways you can configure that to have it do a lot of neat stuff. And finally, when it does this invoke here, that's when it's starting that pipeline in the data factory name. And yeah, my parameters are here. I've added to the collection of parameters, the application name. An application is a collection of packages. That's what the metadata does inside of Framework Community Edition. And so when we're done here, let's go back to the pipelines here. And we see they're just kind of sitting there. My agent is running. There's nothing up my sleeve. Well, there's a tattoo up this sleeve, but there's nothing up this sleeve. And if I go now to my test SSIS solution, I told you I was going to tell you what it does. So my target table, this writes one value, and that's all this does. T-SQL inserts into test results, the name text value, and then a question mark is OLADB. And it's giving me the package variable, and I think that's just a date, time, or something. But this one truncates that, right? So it deletes, not truncates. So if I disable this, I change the package. You can see here I got the little asterisk there. I'll go ahead and save that. And if I go over here and look at my pending changes, I see there's one there, write a record and succeed is now in my included changes. So I'm going to put Utah SQL Server, I gotta spell server right, UG rocks. And when I check this in, it's going to fire this stuff off. We can actually see it over here. It's going to start running, because the continuous integration is on. Start running. There we go. Whew. Love it when a plan comes together. Now, if I click pipelines again, it should show me one of these is running. That's the running icon there. And I'm going to go ahead and click that. It's going to show me another screen that says it is running. It's called Utah. Oh, I did not spell SQL Server right. Dang it. And then it's going to give me this vdemo agent one build deploy. When we go in here, we'll see it's kind of stepping through. It's already into the build. It's doing these things. I'll zoom out. As you can see, it's just a lot of text here. This warning here threw me. I had to learn about that. It's not going to be deprecated soon. It's going to be deprecated next year. But nice of them to let me know. It failed here for the longest time on me. I had several failures here. Finally got over that. It felt great. Then it started failing here. And that's because it can't go across the subscriptions, or it can, but it needs more configuration than I knew about, and I was unwilling to do it. So luckily I found that move and it worked. And we'll see it. It's using PowerShell to execute, to run that framework pipeline that calls the framework package that calls the child package. I know, right? It's all held together by rubber bands and super glue. That's not true. It's bubble gum, not super glue. But here it's running a test, and the test is going to fail. Okay. Now, I should have warned you about that before, because I disabled that truncate. It's going to find 2 records in that table, the one it just wrote, and it didn't truncate first, or delete first. So it's going to find 2 records in it. It should tell me that. The PowerShell should write that out for me when it raises the error here. And we'll zoom right in on it when it does. So this one will fail, but what we'll do is we'll do another run where we enable the truncate task, which only deletes. Oops, let's see, execute test suite. Yeah, I wanted it to fail so it would stop the execution. 2 records found. So it exited with that error. Back to pipelines. If we look in here in our agent, it tells me that it failed. I'm about to get an email that tells me it failed and give me the error. It'll actually give me the error. Back to the SSIS project. Now we're going to do what the cool kids do. Utah SQL Server UG rocks. There. 3 exclamation. Okay, that's right. Check that in. We'll see the build start over here. There it goes. We'll I'll just go to 1. I know it's the right one. And there we are running. And there's our job. So we're down into build SSIS again. This time when we get to execute test suite, it should succeed. Let's see. I'm humming the Jeopardy theme in my mind. If I remember right, this took a while. And by the way, we can, while we're waiting for this, we can right click and go to versions again. And we're going to see, I think it was 904, 908. UTC was the last version, the latest version. There should be a couple more in there older than that now. And yep, there are 3 more in there older than that now. So these are the ones we've added since then. It is really deploying out there to this. And there we go. It's going to run the test suite. This should succeed this time. If I remember right, this took about 30 seconds as well. It should succeed. And then it's when the magic happens. Then it runs the next pipeline. And the next pipeline deploys a version out to my prod project folder. Yeah, prod folder. And then it runs it in prod. Now, again, that's bold to do that, but I would definitely automate from dev to test When I was at Unisys, we had 6 tiers in our life cycle. They were there for a number of reasons. Every now and then we would grow to 7 or 8. It just depended on what we were doing. But what we learned was the Pareto Principle applied when we were doing these deployments. So the lower in the stack, we could start the deployments. The Pareto Principle says you'll find it's the 80-20 rule. So we would find the 20% of actually 80% of our bugs in that first run. And then when we promoted it up to the next level, there would be 20% of the errors left. We'd find 80% of those. So now we're down to 4%. And by the time we went to prod, even if we were just in like a 4-tier architecture, which we weren't, by then we were under a 1% of errors, and it pretty much held. And so why go through all this frustration like I did today, trying to figure out this error that I had no idea existed? I do it because it's worth it. I do it because I want confidence, and I want you to have confidence. This is work. Getting all of this stuff set up is work. This is more than a day. But once it's set up, you can push your code out to dev, check it in to DevOps, have it deployed to dev, and a test execution take place. And if that, what I would do is I would promote it to the test server and then try it again. You're going to run into errors when you do this, something that needs to be externalized. The connection string needs to be changed or something. You're going to run into bugs. But what you want to be able to do is, as you get better and better at predicting the bugs that are going to happen when you go from dev to test and from test to QA, then your confidence is going to increase. And you may get to that spot. Again, I'm always nervous about production. You may get to that spot where it's just a 2-step process for you. You check in your code, it goes all the way to QA. And then once everything is signed off on, you present a report, print it out, whatever, screenshot, and somebody on the release team or a production DBA goes and pulls code out of source control or runs a job like this that promotes that code from QA to production with 99.9% confidence that it's just going to work. And if you don't have that right now, let me tell you, it feels good. It's a great feeling to reach that level of maturity in your process with data integration. A lot of people talk about data science these days, and it's magic. I am not a data scientist, but data science, when it kind of came out, everybody thought it was just couple of 3 jobs rolled into one. It turns out that's not accurate. They split out data engineering and stuff from that. And it turns out that that's what this is. Data integration is data engineering. It's that kind of work, cleansing data, moving it. And that's really 50 to 90% of all data science projects. True story. Ask any data scientist. Munging is one of the terms they use to describe it. So it kind of does need its own field to do that. And that's why I call myself chief data engineer at Enterprise Data and Analytics. But if, we've done this for a number of enterprises. We've just come in and not even touched SSIS other than to, have developers, post their code and put it into source control and set up these pipelines for them. And once you do that and you've got that kind of confidence, I mean, you may get it's not unusual when things don't go well, things fail. You're going to have some pushback from management. And what they're thinking and not saying is, isn't there some way you can do this better? You can mitigate these risks. And this is one way to do that, not the only way, but this is one way to do that. And what you'll find is, if 9 out of 10 or 99 out of 100 of your deployments, and you'll start seeing those numbers, if they start just working, when you go to production, you can push the button with confidence. It's going to take a while to get that first one done, but that second one's going to take a little less time, and the third less, and the fourth. You're going to get to that spot where you can just do these deployments and upper management knows you're on it. You've invested the time to set this up and generate confidence. Heck, they can even log in and see the reports. Project managers don't have to come bug you. They can see where you are. It's right here. Go right into this. Once that happens, it's a different world. Honest, in my heart of hearts, I've seen this so many times with teams. It's a different job. My friend Jeremiah Peshka once said, if you can't change the place you work, then change the place you work. And that was very wise. Jeremiah's a wise guy. I said that wrong. I didn't mean it that way. I meant he's an intelligent human being. Put it that way. And I like him a lot. And what he was saying was, you can change jobs, but maybe you lose seniority and you're starting at the bottom again, and vacation and insurance and blah, blah, blah. Change what's going on in there. Go ahead and be bold. If you reach that point where you're like, I'm going to quit, you got nothing to lose, right? Go ahead and introduce this. Tell the project manager, I want to do this on the next update when we do a change to our data warehouse load. Do something like this. All right, that's my spiel. And if you want to learn more about me, andyleonard.blog/learn-more. And here's my email address. I love helping teams get to that confidence and change their whole job by doing that. And I would just like to say thank you for the honor and privilege of allowing me to present to you this evening, my time. And it's always an honor to present. Thanks.
Andy, thank you. This is some amazing stuff that you can do with the pipelines for SSIS. And I agree with you completely. I think you gain a lot just by having the automation there to save the time for the manual process. But even bigger than that, the consistency that you get and the ability you get now to shorten the time between development and production. I only had one question as I was going through, but you answered it about 15 minutes ago. And I was trying to figure out if you could chain pipelines together, and then you did it. And I'm like, oh, there it is. Yep. You already knew exactly what I was going to ask. So I wanted to see, because I had the setup in my mind was exactly what you had. Is like, hey, I want to go out, I want to build it, and then I want to test it, and then I want to move it again. And I was like, that's the piece right there. This is so awesome. I love how you automated the test too, to say, okay, I'm going to check and make sure it does what it's supposed to.
It's pretty contrived. I mean, there's usually when this is in the enterprise and being used for CICD, there's a number of reconciliation stored procedures, especially if you're doing data warehouse loads or just ODS loads. You just want to make sure the data made it from point A to point B. That's your first order of magnitude or first order of checks. And I wrote a series called ETL Instrumentation. It's old, but if you type that into what Ed Watson calls Biml, you'll see I own that topic. And while it's old, the principles are sound, and it's just a way, again, to add more confidence. You want to see that the number of records made it. You want to see that maybe there's some hash you can perform, or, I love modulus with large prime numbers so that I can get, the leftover of a large sum of money if I'm doing a table or a large count. Just some ways to see that the amount of data is there and the values made it. That's going to get you up around the 90% confidence level that your data is there in a test scenario. You can write custom testing for other stuff. You can pick out a handful of records. You can even randomly pick out records. We've done that before. I've done it all in stored procs. There's some other database testing tools out there, and I'm not knocking any of them. I just usually write my own and just make sure that it's showing me what it wants. And here's the beauty of taking any approach you want to testing, using some other product or writing your own, is what will happen is it'll fail. Maybe the first time you run your test, it'll fail. And then you'll find out why it failed, and you'll fix one of the test results and it'll succeed. And the next time you go through this process, maybe in another 3-4 weeks or something, that same test will succeed, but maybe another will fail. And you'll find out why. Maybe you're missing a use case, there's a null somewhere, you fix that. And it turns out that all of these tests that you're doing, and this works even if you're executing them manually in Azure Data Studio or SSMS, they become your regression tests for your next version. So imagine knowing, or almost knowing, being 99.9% sure that your update didn't break anything that was working. I can't tell you what a peace that brings, to you. You can go home and sleep, and you're not going home while it's dark outside, right? You do a deployment and you go home at 4:30 or 5. It's a whole different job. You're still at the same place, doing the same kind of work, but that confidence and peace that you have, and trust me, management loves this. They also want that confidence and peace, and you're giving it to them. So, I mean, I have on my consulting costume, but today I wore my shirt with a quote on it. I think TJ's seen me wear it before. It says all software is tested, some intentionally. And it, dash Andy Leonard. But the rest of that is some of it's tested by your soon to be former largest customer. And that's from a true story. So, you increase your value, you actually multiply your value to the organization, to your team, to your customers. When you're able to do that, you shorten that cycle for continuous improvement. It's almost magic. And I can't stress it enough. So I appreciate your feedback on that, Chad. I'm glad I answered your question. Are there any other questions? Anybody else?
We've got one in the chat, and then if anybody wants to either unmute or put it in the chat if you have other questions. The one question that we got is from Lars. He says, I'm at an AWS shop. Suggestions on generating interest in Azure?
I'm pretty sure AWS has something similar to this, and Git is pretty agnostic. Like you could run GitHub stuff. And it's just a matter of, it's just a connection string. That's the beauty of this. One of my clients right now actually hired me to write. It blew my mind. Never been hired to write before, other than books. But it's they're across Google and AWS and Azure. And some of the stuff that's being done in some of the other clouds is just amazing. And it's, Azure's coming along. I mean, Azure, I think, has done a number of things right. They've done, all clouds have something that they're really, really good at, and something else that you look at and just kind of snicker, but they're all coming at this hard and heavy these days. They know this is where the money is. I'm pretty sure AWS has something like this. If they don't, Git runs on servers. I mean, you can stand it up inside of there, one of their VM instances, or they probably have something very similar to Azure DevOps that's like Git as a service or something. It's almost the same as what I showed you today. The principles are the same. It's just a different platform and different commands. I know for a fact Git will play well with scripting languages and PowerShell. So, you can use the native tools that are out there. The open source Git's still out there for free.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
I do have one, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I was wondering, the pipeline demonstration you just showed us is somehow let's say I have multiple projects and I'm running one pipeline. I mean, I'm running a project pipeline there. Is it possible that that pipeline can call other project pipeline and trigger other project pipeline?
So inside of Azure DevOps,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, that can be done.
Okay. Okay. So do you know if it's being done via the API call or something else?
So you can definitely do anything you'd like by the APIs. I mean, there's a lot of customizable steps in there. I haven't, I've never started another pipeline until one has finished. So I am a huge, huge fan of, no matter what I'm doing, to break it into little chunks. And I want each little chunk to have a function. Even when I write SSIS packages, I don't like to write big, long SSIS packages with multiple data flows in them. I'll make a bunch of SSIS packages with one data flow in them. It's one of the reasons why I designed a framework, because I solved a problem and created another one. All right, great. How do I run all of these packages in this order? Well, a framework will do that.
Okay.
And I could keep going with stuff like that. But if I've got a little starter pipeline that just does the build, then that one runs. And when it succeeds, there's a deploy that just does a deploy to dev. It's setting next. And what I showed you today, I had both those combined in that first one, but I'd build it in, in real life, I'd build that as two separate things. I want a minimal amount of tasks, and I don't care how many pipelines I build. I want to string those together in such a way that it really does two things for me. So it's going to do the job that I want it to do. Excuse me. But hang on, I got a cough. It also facilitates pipeline reuse. So maybe I've got a, maybe I've got a different project that's a subset of the project that I'm using. Well, I can configure that, to run using either a subset of pipelines or maybe the same full set. But what I'm getting at, Andy, is I want to, in all of the work that I've done to date, I'm always triggering when that previous pipeline finishes and succeeds. And I'm doing exactly what I showed you here. I'm gonna blow it up. If it doesn't succeed, if it fails a test, I'm gonna stop it right there and have it report back to me that pipeline and task failed.
Yeah, totally agree. That makes the pipeline more making sense to me.
Yeah, and when you think about it, the pipeline's a little meta, right? It's like software. It's
Like
software that runs software. It really is. And so you want to make sure that it's really bad when something fails and the mechanism you've built to report that failure fails. That's the bad part. That second piece. Failing is okay, it's normal, but not knowing you failed, that's bad.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're very welcome, sir.
Well, thank you, Andy. I appreciate your time and your preparation. I know you put a lot of work in today, making sure that it would run smoothly, and it did. It was awesome. Thank you so much. This is really valuable.
I'm glad it did.
It worked well. For those of you on the call, we'll have the recording up on the Utah Geek Events YouTube site here shortly. I think the file's got to get processed, so it might take a little bit of time, but the replay will be available there.
And if one of y'all want to drop me an email, I'll send you the deck.
Awesome. That's perfect. Thank you.